Hey, good morning. When I was in college in the early 1980s, it was a different time. The Soviet Union looked so powerful. It looked like that was history. That was being on the right side of history, was supporting communism, that they were eventually going to win. I went to Colorado State University, and the professors, they said as much. They said, this is the progress of history. You have slavery, then feudalism, then capitalism, then socialism, then communism. This is the way it goes. You may have a little hiccups in there, but this is the future. And the Soviet Union looked so strong. They had so many more tanks and men. They were the primary movers to defeat Nazi Germany. They were had the technology. It just looked like communism was spreading over the world, and we in the West were just trying to hold it back as long as we could. And then something funny happened. In the late 1980s, early 90s, it pretty much fell apart overnight. It collapsed. And now we're in a new era. And it's been over 30 years ago now. So a lot of people forget that. But it was amazing how quickly it fell apart, and no one really expected it. And I was watching a documentary about the Soviet Union the other day, and some of the historians were trying to explain the reasons for it. Like in late, I think it was 78 or 1979, Brezhnev, who was in charge of the Soviet Union, invaded Afghanistan. And that was kind of like their Vietnam. They got stuck in Afghanistan. And then the economy stagnated. And then Gorbachev came in to have openness, but then you had the Chernobyl disaster, and the Soviets reverted back their old ways of lying, trying to minimize the damage. And the thought was those crises brought the entire system down. But I don't think those events, if they would have happened earlier, let's say 50 years prior under either Lenin or Stalin, it wouldn't have crashed the system. They had a lot of issues, a lot worse than Chernobyl or Afghanistan. I mean, they had World War II. They almost lost the war. They lost millions of men. They had the Holodomor, a famine that killed millions of people, mostly in Ukraine. And again, at the time, it was part of the Soviet Union. They had a lot of hardship, but they went through it. And I think it was more than just leadership. I think the difference was that the people under Lenin and even under Stalin, for the most part, they truly believed in the system. I think they experienced hardships, but people are willing to endure hardships if they see a good outcome, if they see the promise of a better life. And at the time, a lot of people, not everyone, thought that communism would give them a better life. A lot of these people were peasants under the czar. They lived very poor. They saw the conditions in many places like Britain, where under capitalism, a lot of people were very poor and they worked hard. So this was the idea, hey, let's share the wealth. Let's just all work together, and everyone, this would be a life for everyone. I know we like to think of it as now they were all just evil, but I think most of the people thought, hey, this is a good thing. We just got to stick with it. At least a critical mass, not everyone. But by the time we got to Brezhnev, so we had basically Lenin, and then Stalin, and then Khrushchev, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Then Khrushchev basically got pushed out. And then we went into this era of Brezhnev in the 70s. And by that time, everything really started to stagnate. And I think the people in the Soviet Union, they no longer really believed in the system. And again, there were some true believers, like I'm sure a lot of women were, because they believe what they're told, or children. But there was a critical mass of people that were very cynical about the whole project. They could see how the West was more prosperous, even though the Soviet Union tried to hide it from them. And there was a sense that it wasn't going to get better. There was not a bright future ahead. It's not like, oh, we just have another 5-year plan and then we'll be in paradise. They've been through many of those 5-year plans and they saw it wasn't going to work. And the people, they weren't in the position really to rebel, but they were kind of resigned. They didn't really support the system, at least a critical mass didn't. And so when you have that situation, if you have any troubles like Afghanistan or Chernobyl, that just accelerates the problem. Whereas again, years ago, they would have just gone through that with no troubles. And I thought of that today because I think that sort of describes the current situation we're in now in the West of what I call this liberal global homo democracy. I don't know what else to call it, but it started after World War II, but it has really accelerated after the end of the Cold War. Ironically, once communism fell in Russia and Eastern Europe, then we had this whole idea of we're going to remake the whole world into liberal democracy where we celebrate, I think the big one was equality, meaning all races are equal, all people are equal, both sexes are equal. That was their big push. And if there's ever inequality, it's not because of biological reasons, it's because of hate or oppression or something like that. So we just got to fix these inequalities and we'll have utopia. And it started, I think, with a race like, well, all the races are the same except for superficial differences. It's not a real biological concept. And then it eventually progressed that way to even sex, that there's really no difference between men and women. And now they're at the point where men can become women, women can become men, if we all believe it. It's gone to an absurd level. And you still have a lot of true believers, don't get me wrong. But just like communism eventually became exhausted, I think this whole liberal democracy we're under right now has become exhausted. Yeah, you have the purple hair, middle-aged women, still they're a true believer, believing what they see on The View. But in general, we just have a vibe now, I feel, that even people that aren't, ready to have a revolution or anything like that, they've become very cynical with this system. They don't buy all the stuff that they were told about the equality of the races, or we can all change sexes and men and women are exactly the same. And anything a man can do, a woman can do better. All that they're seeing, this has all been lies and bullshit. And maybe they don't want to say anything at this point because they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to get fired. They don't want to get deplatformed. It's sort of like in the Soviet Union under Brezhnev. Under Brezhnev, it wasn't like under Stalin that you would necessarily be executed, but everyone was still worried about the secret police in the Soviet Union. So mostly in the Soviet Union during that era, they did self-censorship, just like we do here now on social media, on YouTube and other platforms. We try to censor ourselves because we really don't know what the rules are. And that's the way it was under the Soviet Union. But that doesn't mean people really agree with the system. They just don't want to get into trouble. There's a big difference. And I think in general, in the early days of communism, especially under Lenin and even under Stalin, enough people really believed that the system could create something great. But by the time you got to Brezhnev in the 70s, that didn't exist anymore. And I think you see this with a liberal democracy, all their ideas about LGBTQ, trans kids, all the races are exactly the same. And if there's any differences we see is because of white supremacy or white privilege. People are getting cynical about that, and they're seeing that's not really true. And we're at the same point that the Soviet Union was. So I think our system in the West, just not in the United States, but also England, Germany, Canada, Australia, is very brittle. And it won't take much. A crisis could really topple the system very, very quick. And that crisis could be an economic crisis. That could happen because of the huge deficit. Nothing's going to be done about the deficit. Even Elon Musk is black-pilled about that. There's, in a democracy, there's no way to deal with that. We're just going to spend until there's a financial crisis. I've made my peace with that. There's no way you're going to get anyone to change that. And or it could be our military, it collapses and we lose to the Russians because of our weakness in DEI and just how we took our eye off the ball. There's a lot of things that can happen right now that could quickly turn over the whole apple cart. And what we thought was forever, this liberal democracy, just like that, just like communism fell, our system could fall. It doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be violent. When the Soviet Union fell, it wasn't really that violent, but it was a chaotic period. We could be headed, I think we are, to the same situation because I just don't feel the critical mass supports the system anymore or believes in it. Yeah, they'll be quiet because I don't want to get in trouble. And yeah, just like in the 70s or 80s, you had the true believers in communism. Again, mostly women that just believe the propaganda easy. And we have that here in the United States still, especially in college campuses, or some purple hair, middle-aged woman. She believes what her TV tells her. But in general, we don't have that support anymore. And I think we could be looking at a big change coming up. Talk to you guys later.